Hi, this is Benoy, your host of the Solar Maverick podcast. I would like to thank Schwerd Consulting for sponsoring this episode. Schwerd Consulting is a leading solar consulting firm dedicated to design, engineering, and owner's representation in all areas of solar photovoltaics for the commercial, industrial, and utility markets. Thank you again for sponsoring the podcast. Remember, by you saying no to something, yes to everything or yes to certain things, you're saying no automatically to other things.
Of course.
And everyone's time is limited. Hi, this is Benoy, your host of the Solar Maverick podcast. This is a guest interview that I did on another podcast called The Formula by Timothy Roman. Timothy is the CEO and founder of Roman Media Group, which is a digital marketing company. And he was also featured in the New York Times bestseller by Gary Vaynerchuk called Crushing It. This podcast, we talk about being a part of a startup accelerator, investing, solar, and podcasting. I hope you enjoy this guest episode that I was on the Formula podcast with Timothy Roman, and make sure to check out his podcast as well. Thank you.
What's up, podcast? Here at the office. Got an exciting guest. We actually met totally randomly at a real estate get-together through an associate, I guess you could call her, right? And then we kind of hit it off. We have similar ideology on the state of entrepreneurship and business. So I quickly, from what you've told me, I got super excited and pumped about your background, what you do. And that's kind of like what I'm aspiring to do right now as this next chapter in my life. So I'll let you introduce yourself.
Yeah, definitely, Tim. I appreciate you having me on the Formula podcast. My name is Benoy Thanjan. I'm the CEO and founder of Reneu Energy. We're a solar company based in Jersey City, New Jersey. We develop commercial, industrial, and utility scale solar projects. Actually, one of the high profile projects that we're working is with the New York Housing Authority, with putting solar on 38 different buildings in Manhattan and Brooklyn. We're also actually providing that solar energy to low-income housing. And then we're also training NYCHA residents through job training to also install the panels. So my background's been really in renewable energy and solar. I was at Tesla Solar City before I started my company 7 years ago. I was at another solar company, a private equity firm, Deloitte and their energy group, and a hedge fund. And then we spoke about this, Tim, as well. I'm invested in a lot of different businesses. I'm all about passive income. And it was amazing how we hit it off. You know, Jacqueline, who's been on your podcast, who's an associate and a friend, made the introduction and thought that there would be something. And we only spoke actually pretty briefly, but we really hit it off. And
absolutely.
We've had as well great conversations since that. So thank you.
Of course. No, thanks for being me. I was just really taken away by one, can't even imagine the depth of your knowledge when it comes to starting businesses, scaling them, plus your knowledge on subject matter of, renewable energy, you being invested in multiple companies. You own restaurant, from what I understand. You're one of the founders of a BNI group. So like, so take me back to where it was like pretty linear and basic.
Sure. I don't know if it was ever linear or basic. So what really actually got me into entrepreneurship is both my parents actually had their own business.
Awesome.
So my mom is a pediatrician. She has her own practice in the Bronx. And then my dad had a lighting company that sells light bulbs, ballasts, and fixtures to small businesses and corporations. So since I was 13 or 14, I was involved in both my parents' businesses, more specifically my dad. And there was a certain period of time where I pretty much did all the different functions of the business and ran the business. And I remember summers when I had my driver's license or college, I would actually be doing deliveries. So I would actually be driving a van for 12 to 14 hours a day all over the New York tri-state area, delivering light bulbs. So I think that's what really got me wanting to do in entrepreneurship. Mm-hmm. Really, the main things is kind of controlling your own destiny, not having to report to someone. Obviously, you report to your clients. And then the freedom that you could get. I mean, I think with entrepreneurship, financially, it has the most opportunity, obviously, of making money versus working at a corporate job. And then to kind of go briefly through my progression is I worked at my first corporate job was at a hedge fund called D.E. Shaw, which is a multi-billion-dollar hedge fund, where I was an intern, and that really got me interested in finance. I went to NYU and had a finance background. And then after I graduated, I actually worked at a company called Ernst & Young and their valuation practice. And then I went to Rutgers for my MBA in finance. And then I worked at Deloitte actually between my first and second year of my MBA. And I was also in finance there. And then that's how I got into energy. And then I moved from there. I worked at a healthcare company doing corporate development, corporate strategy. But then I worked at a private equity fund that invested in renewable energy projects, and it was a small private equity fund based in Ridgewood, New Jersey, now in Montvale, called Reneu Energy. And that's what actually got me interested in renewables. That's where I became passionate about it. And about 10 years ago, I did all this research and I felt that solar was going to be the next big thing.
Right.
And a lot of people told me I was wrong. I didn't know what I was talking about. And it's been amazing. I've been in the solar industry now for 10 years.
Wow.
I basically worked at solar installer called Vanguard Energy Partners, where I did project finance work. And then I worked at Solar City Tesla, which is an Elon Musk company. And I worked for his cousin, Lyndon Rive, who is the CEO of Solar City. He was also the head of the finance department at that time. And I had the opportunity to meet Elon, which was amazing. And then I thought that, hey, I had to start my own company. I have all this great experience. Solar City was actually one of my first clients. And then I started my own business. Meanwhile, that was about 7 years ago in August, which is amazing. And then I was kind of hustling on the side for 2 years before I actually started the company. And then over time, I started actually investing in other businesses.
Wow. So that's actually a great question and segue, because that's sort of me being in business now a little over 3.5 years. I'm finally feel like I'm in a place where I'm able to sort of do that.
Yes.
And no mentors, no parents that know anything about business. It's sort of just been all trial and error, like hustle and blood, sweat, and tears and sweat equity.
That's what it's about.
That's it, right? That's what it's about. So you definitely have all those same characteristics. What would you say, or what would you recommend to someone like myself who has a successful business, or now I'm on my second business and launching a third, but hasn't stepped out and is looking to invest, not just in things like real estate,
Sure.
but in a business? Shed some light on that.
Yeah, definitely. So for me, investing in another business, I really have to trust that person. So usually I have to know them for a period of time or work with them. I don't blindly go into the business without knowing the founders of the company. I have done that though when a close friend has vouched for me about a person, but then also I have to see like a track record of success. So if they don't have a track record, then I'm hesitant to invest. And then really where I'm more of a silent partner helping with strategy. And I would say those are the big things. And really, if you could trust the person, you see their vision, you see examples of that, and then basically them having a track record of success, and then them being easy to communicate, easy to work with, extremely transparent, honest, trustworthy. And I see so many business opportunities now because I have invested in several businesses. I would say 97% of them I say no to them because it's not the right opportunity for the various reasons that I mentioned. So.
Now, are these the businesses that you invested in, are they directly related to the space that you're in now, or are they completely opposite?
Sure. I'm invested in 2 renewable energy companies. One is another solar company that does something a little bit different in solar. They actually find ideal sites for utility scale solar projects. I knew the founder of this company for actually a few years. And then I basically was provided sweat equity to basically help them out. If they were a startup company, I actually helped them raise some of their initial funding for their company and help them with bringing the potential buyer of solar projects that were early stage. So then basically for that value, I was provided equity into that company. And then I actually invested in a company that basically takes municipal solid waste, which is your trash from the landfill, and they convert it to ethanol or energy. And basically it's a patented technology that a scientist worked 15 years on after he watched Back to the Future. I don't know if you remember the movie, but at the end of the movie, Doc comes back from the future, takes the garbage from Marty McFly's garbage can, puts it into the car for energy. Yep. Well, a scientist saw this and said he has to work on that. So he spent 15 years creating that technology. And then they're developing the first project with this technology in Maryland. So those are 2 businesses that I was very familiar with. Then I've actually invested in, now let me count actually, 2, 3, 6 restaurant and bars.
Wow.
So one is a bar in Jersey City called Hudson Hall, which is a Czech beer garden and smokehouse. And basically it's a friend of mine who started Hudson Hall. He has a lot of successful experience with restaurants and bars in New York and New Jersey, and I could trust him. We're friends, and he's extremely transparent. And I came in more in a reorganization where they were actually reorganizing the ownership group. He told me what their strategy was because it wasn't doing as well as that they would like liked and kind of gave me the strategy that they were doing going forward. And that's why I invested in that. And it's interesting because from that opportunity came investing in Ani Ramen, which is a Japanese ramen restaurant. I'm actually one of the co-owners of the 2 locations in Jersey City, Summit, and then Maplewood, which is opening next month, and then American Dream, which is the big mall that's opening next to the Meadowlands or MetLife Stadium. So that one was interesting because it was my Muay Thai instructor who came up to me and said, hey, I know you have experience investing in restaurants. The owner of Ani Ramen wants me to invest in Summit and Maplewood. Can you help me analyze the opportunity? The first thing I asked him was, do you trust them? And he's like, yes, he's been a friend of mine. And the Muay Thai instructor and I have been friends for 8 or 9 years. And then I analyzed the financials for him. And I said, oh, I would invest in Ani Ramen. And it was one of my favorite places in Jersey City. So there's the situation where I didn't really know the ownership group. I did meet with them several times and they met with me because at the end of the day, they want a silent partner who could help them out. And that's how I got involved in those restaurants. Then I recently, 2 months ago, actually invested in a technology company. So that was my first tech investment. It's called Mogul, which is a women's platform that basically is focused on productivity, creating a community to help women find career opportunities at major Fortune 500 companies. Gary Vee is an investor in that company, Susie Orman as well, the founder of Match.com and some other, the Hearst Corporation, which is also a media company, is one of the prime lead investors. And that was interesting because the woman who founded it, Tiffany Fan, I've known her for 7 years. We're actually in an accelerator, an entrepreneurship accelerator called Startup Leadership Program. And I was really impressed with her back in the day when we were in class together because it was basically a year-long course on entrepreneurship. And then a few months ago, she approached me about potentially investing in her company. And it was just something that was an easy sort of decision for me to do because she's an amazing person and has accomplished a lot. And the company's already extremely successful. So that's kind of the long...
So you're a busy guy.
Yeah, definitely.
So, I mean, from what I'm hearing is definitely trust systems, and then it's followed by checking in the financials and a track record. Yeah. But then big word that sticks out is network, right? So the first investments sound like they were directly related to your market, your industry. Yeah. So it was because you kind of had your ear on the ground, you knew what was happening, you knew the trends that were emerging. So it was easier for you to jump in. Was the restaurant because you also had one yourself, or does just randomly happen that you started investing in the food business?
Yeah, so that randomly happened. So I would tell you now that I'm involved in 6 restaurants, that the restaurant industry is a lot harder than I ever imagined it to be. But fortunately, I feel like I've invested in 2 great restaurants, Hudson Hall and Ani Ramen, that have done, they're extremely successful restaurants. But that one was more that the opportunity came. These opportunities are only really open to friends and family. Right. So for me, like, I don't have a background in hospitality or restaurants. I actually am not involved in the day-to-day in any of the restaurants. I really help with like high-level strategy and bringing events. And it was more like having that trust and seeing the vision of what the entrepreneurs had. And also if I feel like there's some sort of synergy with my business. Right. So like, for example, I have a solar company that's based in Jersey City. Hudson Hall and Ani Ramen are walking distance from my office. Clients would rather go there for lunch, dinner than my office. And then also we have events there as well. So there are synergies between both. Also, they have relationships as well to people that I don't have access to. You talked about like the network of people, which is important. It's all about who you know. So I think those were kind of the big things too. The other thing with Mogul, there was a synergy as well with them because I learn from the entrepreneurs that I'm working with. I'm learning about other industries. I'm incorporating some of the things that I see to my own business because I'm constantly trying to adapt and learn. And what's exciting to me about the Mogul investment is they're very tech savvy. And I would say as a solar company, we're probably very tech savvy for a solar company, but not for the rest of... And we take a lot of things that we've learned from other industries and kind of incorporate it. The solar companies were and the municipal solid waste is a lot easier for me to invest in because I pretty much know that sector, from the back of my hand. So.
Gotcha. So now it sounds like even some of them where you're a silent partner and you're not involved in day to day, outside of obviously an accountant and a lawyer, right, who helps you sort out through their agreements and how the financials will be structured. How does one time manage that? how do you time manage it? Rather?
Yeah. So I would say 95% of my time is spent on the solar company and 5% is spent on the investments. And then it's more like almost like a passive income stream. Like I'm collecting checks every month, every quarter. But you're right. It is actually challenging because there are things that are coming up that I have to handle. So it's really like just time management, kind of focusing on the three things that are important for all my businesses and all the businesses that I invested in to be there if it's important. It's based on priorities. So that's kind of helped me. Like I basically, in the beginning of the day, come up with what are the three most important things that will move the needle. And if that involves like outside of my solar business, then that's fine. Any way that I could help these businesses that I've invested in the people, I'm helping them as well with other stuff. For example, Ani Ramen, I helped them raise a lot of money for restaurants that they're opening in the future. We're meeting 2 weeks from now on a strategy session of me bringing in other investors since their growth has been pretty amazing in a very short period of time. Yeah, awesome. I think it's not easy, I could tell you. And then there's also so much variable, and I'm constantly overwhelmed. And what really got me interested in investing in other businesses was my favorite show is Shark Tank.
Of course.
So, I've taken almost watched every episode, every season. So it's interesting because now I start thinking the way
they do.
And
quickly being able to analyze.
And ask maybe the same questions.
That's awesome.
As sort of the sharks to kind of see. Maybe I'll eventually get on the show one day. That would be a dream.
That show.
I met Damon John a few weeks ago, and that was like really amazing. He's one of my favorite sharks on Shark Tank. Mark Cuban, Lori Grenier, and Barbara Cochran. And actually, it's interesting, from that Accelerator that I was in, Startup Leadership Program, there have been several people from our class that have been on Shark Tank and that got funded actually on Shark Tank.
Wow.
There's one company that Robert Hershevek funded with someone who was in my class.
Amazing.
At Startup Leadership Program. It's just amazing to kind of see these people that you're in class with.
Right.
And they're, pitching on Shark
Tank.
Yeah. So it's just amazing to kind of see.
That's definitely going to be my next question. So I have a tons of listeners that are sort of in the same position that I am. I'm heavy in the real estate industry, and whether it's a spec home builder, custom home builders, multi-unit developers. I mean, we have clients in Boston and relationships in Boston. So they're constantly being pitched opportunities. I'm constantly being pitched opportunities. And with just this lack of knowledge and experience that you have, it's extremely hard for me to just quickly analyze it, right? In a nutshell, as recent as 2 weeks ago, a car wash had approached me, and because of my new company, Roman Group Media, they've asked for me to come on board, take care of the marketing, be the in-house CMO in exchange for profit share, right?
Definitely.
And it was sort of like a shock to my system because I'm like, oh my God, this is like a Shark Tank episode. I have no idea how to respond to this, right? This guy's throwing out numbers and I'm like, okay, I can figure that out. What would you say in a nutshell, quick punchline, an average return that you would look for in whatever the business it may be, what kind of a term, and what kind of a time investment would be expected of you?
Sure. So, I mean, there's a lot of different questions in there. I mean, for me, from a return perspective, it has to be a double digit or over return to get me excited. The other thing that I didn't mention is that I actually invest in stocks. So I basically use like Warren Buffett's sort of valuation methodology of investing in publicly traded companies. And I've been extremely successful in that and holding these positions for a long time. And then I have to feel like there's a synergy with my business or what I could add value to them. One thing, if I'm just investing money into the business, I'm already accepting that I might not get that money back. That potentially, the first thing is, it's interesting because I learned this from reading all these Dale Carnegie books, but accept the worst that could happen, that you could lose everything. So after I invested in these businesses, I'm not thinking about the money that I invested. I'm thinking about how I could add value and help them through this situation. So, and then what you're talking about too is a little bit different, right? Because it sounds like there's some sort of profit sharing where they might not be charging you fees,
right?
Or you might not be charging them.
Exactly.
So it's more of like sweat equity, which I haven't was involved in a solar company like that. For me, it's really like whether you're confident in the people and what they're saying, I always like, people are pitching me all the time with them. I have to feel like they could do it. And then I also just like the initial conversations, I have to feel like we're on the same page because I'm all about being direct, transparent, honest. There's certain values that I'm trying to look for.
Of course.
And then so part of the questioning process is part of that. Also, if you believe that you could add that value to, for example, with Roman Media Group, I'm sure car washes, at least, are not that savvy.
Right,
And I'm sure you could
right.
potentially could add so much value.
For sure.
And potentially if there's, so obviously if you just recently started the company and if you think it's a great opportunity and it's worth your time, because this is the thing. One thing too that I actually have a challenge is saying no. And I have to get better at saying no because I'm getting inundated with so many opportunities. Remember, by you saying no to something, yes to everything or yes to certain things, you're saying no automatically to other things.
Of course.
And everyone's time is limited. So it's really like from a gut feel. I'm not totally into the contract or the financials. Things in all these deals are actually all completely structured differently.
Of course, makes sense.
As well. So it's just unique to the industry. And
Awesome. That's good advice. Very good advice. And then the follow-up question was, as you mentioned the Accelerator. I've always been extremely curious about the atmosphere and sort of like just the couple sentences on that, right? Because it sounds like it's not only created amazing network opportunities, but it's obviously educated you a lot on the startup world, on probably how the investments are done, sweat equity, scalability, the finances of all of that world. So was it something that you really happy you did? Do you recommend it?
yeah, definitely. I highly recommend these entrepreneurship accelerators. If you have the opportunity, you should definitely apply. Obviously, Techstars is probably the most famous one, and you have to give a certain amount of equity to be involved with it. I was in the Startup Leadership Program, which is a popular one, and it was really helpful for me because that was about 7 years ago. So I started my business August of 2012. I got into the Accelerator that started November of 2012 and then ended May of 2013. What blew me away was, I think right now, they're actually going through there's like a 4% acceptance rate for this accelerator now. Like, it's amazing how popular it's gotten. But what blew me away is like the students in our class. It was all different people, but I was just blown away with how smart everyone was, how determined, dedicated, and everyone was unique in their own way. So I learned so much with doing like these group project works. What they would do is like have evening sort of classes that VC firms and law firms were basically subsidizing our program. We did have to pay for it. And then meeting as well, like amazing people. Like I met Esther Dyson, who's actually one of the first investors of Facebook. And she spoke at one of the events, and then she met with me as well. I'm like, oh my gosh, this person is willing to actually spend her time, which is extremely valuable. So I think, and what I learned in the class, and even now, like the network of people. If, for example, I was talking to you, Tim, that I have my own podcast called the Solar Maverick podcast, which is one of the most popular podcasts in solar. But Kevin, who actually edits our podcast, who's the producer of our podcast from Podcast Laundry, I met him because he was an alumni of the Startup Leadership Program. And I was at an alumni event last year. I mentioned as well, Tiffany, who I invested in Mogul, she and I got to know each other doing this class together for a year, and then we stayed in touch. So from a networking opportunity of current people, or alumni of the program, also people that you're in class with, and it also, too, like, obviously, some of these tech accelerators are extremely competitive to get into. People look at it like, oh, wow, like that person came out of that program. Obviously, we're having as well successful people who are having successful exits with their company, successfully raising money, or even getting funded on Shark Tank. So that as well helps the reputation.
Of course. A great stepping stone for sure for anyone in that.
For anyone. So I definitely suggest it's definitely worth it. And there are several entrepreneurship accelerators out there that are global as well, startup leadership programs around the world.
Makes sense. Now, the cost of entries are basically an equity trade-off. Is that what that is? Or
so actually, a startup leadership program, you don't actually provide any equity to be part of the program.
Just a paid.
I think it's like now they only charge $500 to $700 for a year program. And by the way, that's like we would do night classes once a week from 6 to 9. And it's basically being funded by law firms, VC, angel investors, because obviously they want to have an opportunity to get to know
first
the
dibs.
So it's definitely
awesome.
Something to look into.
You're actually segueing it perfectly. So that's one of the last things I wanted to touch on is when we met right away, I was like, I have to have you on. I mean, I'm looking to obviously interview better, bigger guests. I mean, so far, you're definitely like, I would say the Shark Tank quality type of guest. And I'm super thankful for that because you're able to share your wealth of knowledge with my listeners. And my podcast being brand new, right away, you were like, by the way, next week or in 2 weeks, I'm going to the podcast conference. I have a podcast that just recently launched, I believe you said as early as recent as November, right?
Last
and
year,
it's top in your niche. Yeah. And also you're now immersed in this sort of category and you're really taking all these steps. You already have sponsors. So tell me how the podcast happened and tell me a little bit more about the conference you went to.
Hi, this is Benoy, your host of the Solar Maverick podcast. I would like to thank Schwerd Consulting for being the sponsor for this episode. Schwerd Consulting is a leading solar consulting firm dedicated to design, engineering, and owner's representation in all areas of solar voltaics for the commercial, industrial, and utility markets. At Schwerd Consulting, they like to say, we know solar. We don't just do solar. What sets them apart is their 100% focus on solar and understanding the business of their clients. In its 5 years of business, Schwerd Consulting has provided services for approximately 450 megawatts of PV across over 330 sites in 15 states plus the Caribbean. That total includes 300 megawatts of completed designs and engineering and 150 megawatts of consulting and owner rep services. Let Schwerd Consulting take the burden off you and bring ease and expertise in all areas of engineering and design, or help you navigate the technical world of solar. If you're interested in learning more about Schwerd Consulting, you can call at 215-219-6718 or email at admin@schwerdconsulting.com. Schwerd Consulting website is www.schwerdconsulting.com. We'll also have this information as well in the notes of the podcast. Steve Schwerd, who's the owner of Schwerd Consulting, was interviewed on episode 17 and 48 of the Solar Maverick podcast, and also episode 42, which was a panel discussion on how solar technology is changing the world. Thank you to Schwerd Consulting for sponsoring this episode of the podcast.
My podcasting journey has been an amazing journey. Kevin, who I mentioned, he has his company, Podcast Laundry. I met him in an event in July, that startup leadership program. So this all happened actually through the Accelerator. It was an event where we're actually meeting new candidates for the program. And then he told me that he had a podcast called the Create Your Life series, which is on all the major platforms and Sirius XM radio. And I asked him, hey, can I be on your podcast? And he said, sure. And then so I actually did the interview on the podcast August of 2018. It released September of 2018. My marketing person, Lee Wang, who's also my publicist, listened to the interview. He was like, I'm blown away by listening to this interview. We should do a solar podcast. So then we actually hired Kevin, his company, Podcast Laundry, to come up with the strategy of our podcast. And basically, from the podcasts coming out September, Kevin's podcast that I was interviewed in the middle of September of 2018, we then came out with my podcast, which is the Solar Maverick podcast, which was November 15th of 2018. We come out actually with an episode every Tuesday. Lee Wang, who's my marketing person, is also the co-host. And then also Suzanne Waters, who works for me as well, is a co-host. Then we interview different people in the industry. We come out with episodes every Tuesday, and it's been amazing. It's now one of the most popular podcasts in solar energy. We focus on solar and entrepreneurship. And I was telling Tim about this before. It's just every week, the podcast just keeps getting bigger and bigger with the amount of listeners that we're having who are downloading it. It's amazing. And I know you experienced this as well with only 4 to 5 episodes now that you've released. How many people reach out to us because of the podcast? So we're right now inundated with emails, phone calls. What's amazing to me is our whole goal was, when you look at the solar industry, is there anyone who really has a big personal brand for solar? Everyone thinks of probably Elon Musk, but everyone else, there's some people that I know, but not everyone knows. So what's crazy to me is people are going to think of, when they think of solar energy, Benoy, they're going to think of you. And it's been amazing. We've had TV opportunities come along. We've so far turned them down. We're actually working on our own YouTube channel called the Solar Maverick podcast. Well, Solar Maverick YouTube channel. And then the crazy thing for me is when I go to solar conference, so many people will come up to me and then they'll recognize me from my voice.
The picture.
And then the picture. The other thing too, there's solar podcasts, but we're the only solar podcast that you have the picture of the host. So people,
there's the brand.
It's all about personal branding now. So like obviously Gary Vee talks about his personal brand, Ty Lopez, all the sort of people. So it was just amazing to me that none of the other podcasts did that. And so people recognize me at conferences, will come up to me, or people recognize my voice. They're like, I listen to you every Tuesday while I drive or when I do my outdoor run. You said this, which really kind of helped me. So it's amazing because I'm passionate about renewable energy and sustainability. I'm passionate about entrepreneurship. I'm passionate about leaving an impact and adding value. So it's been an amazing journey. As I said to him too, I just came back from Podcast Movement last week in Orlando, Florida. If you're not familiar, it's the biggest podcast conference in the world. There are 3,000 people at this conference, and it was all about podcasting. And I focused on the monetization and marketing of the podcast. And it was amazing for me. The people that, like, for example, I met Lewis Howes, and he has the podcast, The School of Greatness.
Oh, yeah.
And he was one of the first podcasts that I ever listened to. I told him it was actually an interview that he had with Julianne Hough, Julianne Hough from Dancing with the Stars, that he did like 3 years ago. And that's what got me excited about podcasting. Then I was waiting in the registration line. John Lee Dumas, who also has Entrepreneurs on Fire, was standing next to me. So it's amazing. Then I had also VIP access to the conference, and then I'm sitting in the same desk as Pat Flynn.
Wow.
And he was one of the first podcasters. And it was just exciting to kind of be immersed in the podcasting community. Podcasting still is in the early infancy stages.
Right.
It's great marketing. Like right now, Tim, we're talking right here, but I would say within this hour, 30 to 40 people have downloaded the library of our podcast, which is amazing because, as you know, being in marketing, it's all about scalability.
100%.
And people build this relationship and connection, and it's great for branding. So it's been an amazing journey. We're still learning what we're trying to do, but it's been getting better and better. We now have sponsorships as well, as you mentioned. So less than a year out of starting the podcast. And what's amazing too is we're a very niche podcast, and a lot of senior people within the industry are listening to it and commenting on it and recognizing it. We did our first live podcast in front of an audience.
Awesome.
Tuesday, July 30th in Jersey City. We just came out with that episode on how solar technology is changing the world. It's episode 42 of the Solar Maverick podcast. So it's been an amazing journey, and I'm excited that you're a part of it, the formula, and I listened to it and I was really impressed.
Appreciate it.
Yeah,
no, definitely. I mean, and that's the part that I usually like to close it out with, is the part that obviously is my passion, and that's marketing. And you coming from this conference, which was, you said that there's different categories that you could concentrate on, right? The production of it, the creative, and then you really were interested in the monetization and the marketing aspect of it. And that's something that I'm extremely passionate about it. My mentor, Gary Vee, told me that if I didn't start a podcast, the next time he'd see me, he'd punch me in my face. So here we are. And it was something that I struggled with as well, because Roman Group Media was sort of born organically. I was featured in his book. A ton of small businesses and medium-sized businesses started reaching out to me because of how successful my first two businesses were. One was built on a backbone of just search engine optimization, like Web 1.0. Definitely. This new business was completely, seven-figure business, is built completely off the backbone of Instagram, organically mostly. As recent as last year, we started doing Facebook advertising. Obviously, I'm always looking for expertise and vice versa. What would you say that is interesting to you in the sense of not only just marketing the podcast, but this current state of digital marketing and podcasting just being one arm of it, right? We have audio, video, written word, and written word is obviously, it's taken the back seat right now a little bit, which is SEO, blogs, and things like that. Definitely. But video and audio are the dominant ones. What excites you about this era that we're going through right now?
Yeah, so I think there's a couple sort of points. I think everything is about building your personal brand. People want to see a face that they trust And obviously podcasting is a way of people getting to know you, but I really think the future is in video. You're obviously seeing a lot of video content on Instagram. It's amazing how much you see. For me too, it was eye-opening. My marketing person, Lee Wang, and my publicist, he told me, Benoy, just start creating videos, because I have the hesitation of creating videos. So I created actually a minute video that I did the roof of the New York Housing Authority. We're doing the roof assessments for the solar projects we're developing. Our primary marketing channel is LinkedIn, because we're more of a professional solar
B2B.
consulting, B2B. But it was crazy to me because of the engagement that we got versus the podcast. So basically there were 3,000 views of this minute video that I created, 55 likes, 20 comments, and then there was 4 or 5 leads that came, and then there was a speaking opportunity at a conference. So that really shows me like the engagement for video is what is really important. Obviously podcasting is a part of it, but I think there's a huge opportunity with video and people wanting to get to know you. And it's just amazing to me. You know, you could just use an iPhone with it's 4K with streaming. The technology is pretty amazing. It's pretty inexpensive. It doesn't have to be professionally cut, you know, maybe some editing, but I think it's an exciting time with creating content. Gary Vee obviously mentioned, and we talked about it when we first met, about the benefits of podcasting and how you could use it for a lot of different content pieces. Segmented, which actually I heard multiple times at Podcast Movement. So basically, obviously, you know, you have the podcast, which is the audio, which is on all major platforms. I'd recommend as well putting it on YouTube, because obviously Google's all about search. YouTube, they're going to give a priority to it. I know I mentioned to you as well, Tim, that one of the things that I learned at the podcast conference is that we were actually planning to transcribe all the podcasts for search, but Google's actually going to start doing that with all podcasts, so that when you do a Google search, podcast will come up. Start ranking. So from a content perspective and SEO, like podcast, this is a great way. You obviously could take snippets, you could create videos. We're actually planning on then actually almost similar to what Gary did on Crush It and some of his other book, basically transcribe the podcast into a book. I'm so excited. I mean, just to be immersed at the podcast community for 5 days, it was just an amazing, and I feel like there's so much opportunity, and I'm glad that you took the first step forward, because I think the hardest part of starting the podcast is the first episode.
For sure.
And that's great that you're...
No, hearing all this definitely just motivates me even more, and I'll definitely be reaching out for advice and as we hit our learning curves, if you will. Definitely.
And I'm still figuring things out too. So I don't have
and then, so my strongest is the output, right? Is the distribution. So depending on how you guys decide to position it, whether it's to keep your efforts strong B2B, right? Being that that's your main consumer, I'd love to like come in and help you guys strategize and just give you my insight on what's been most successful for me. One of my strongest is Facebook advertising. That's something that I've got down really well. And I've been doing that successfully for other brands now, and launching, activating, scaling. I'd love to help you guys out however I can.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, that's really helpful, because as we mentioned before, it made a great point, Tim, it's about scalability, right? And that's where marketing, content marketing, SEO marketing, using social media platforms, it's just the way of doing business, and it's the most scalable, which I'm all about scalability.
Yeah, the business is the business is the fire, and the scalability is the gasoline that you can pour on it.
That's so true.
Yeah, absolutely. And I know that's something that I've got to witness firsthand, because we do so much A/B testing with our campaigns and marketing campaigns that we do for our clients. And we usually are very good at combining Instagram and Facebook together. Instagram being a lot more influencer marketing based, brand awareness, top funnel strategy, and then Facebook being really narrow, hyper targeted. And combining those two, we've been able to, like, we've had a brand that is in the fashion industry launch on Instagram, now only lives on Instagram, and they're about to hit 7 figures within, 10 months. Because once you see the channel work, now it's just about how much more can we put in it. Because we already know the return on ad spend. We know the ROI. We know what the impressions will be. We know what leads are generated based on X amount of impressions and visits and so on and so forth. So like, that's the subject that I'm super excited about. And now I'm just learning how to integrate the audio and video into that creatively and contextually, so it's scalable.
Yeah, and that's interesting to me, because as I mentioned, like, we've been focused on building my personal brand. So just as for solar, but as well as an entrepreneur, and everything is about about building your personal brand. And Instagram obviously is huge in that. So, helping being an influencer, obviously I'm always looking at other businesses to get involved with that are scalable. So I would definitely love to.
Yeah, we'll keep this going.
Yeah, definitely.
Awesome. Thanks so much for your time. And again, I'm sure this is gonna blow up because you're a well of knowledge, and maybe we'll have like a follow-up and do a version 2 of this.
I would love to. I mean, this has just been amazing. Tim, I was impressed when I listened to the first 4 episodes of the formula. So thank you.
Awesome.
It's an honor to be here, and I'm excited to be part of your podcast journey and happy to come anytime on the show.
Awesome. Thanks so much for your time. Appreciate it.
Thanks for listening to the Solar Maverick podcast. The Solar Maverick podcast is brought to you by Reneu Energy. We're a solar development and consulting firm. If you believe that this podcast is adding value to you, please give us a 5-star review and share with those that you think could benefit from this information. Please email all questions, suggestions, and feedback to info@reneuenergy.com. That's info@reneuenergy.com. The Solar Maverick podcast is produced by Podcast Laundry and executive produced by Benoy Thanjan and Kevin Y. Brown.